Every achievement comes at a price. Mine was discovered on a sunny Thursday at Le Bernardin, while I was balancing a glass of Chardonnay and smiling at clients responsible for $42 million in investments. Richard raised his crystal glass, his smile not reaching his eyes. To Maxwell Financial Advisors, where excellence isn't just a goal, it's who we are. Polite applause echoed. 6 years devoted to that firm. 6 years building relationships, working nights and weekends, sacrificing my personal life for collective success. Then Richard fixed his gaze on me. Amanda, could you give us a moment? In the hallway, away from prying eyes, he discarded any pretense of courtesy. You're fired, effective immediately. What do you mean? The Harrison clients just signed. I'm not interested in your excuses. You've hit your limit, Amanda. You're just not capable of going any further. Olivia will take over your clients starting tomorrow. They snatched the folder from my hands. My badge was confiscated. I was escorted out like a criminal as I watched through the glass Richard toasting with Olivia. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get more stories like this. 3 months before that fateful lunch, I found discrepancies in the company's accounts. At first, they looked like harmless accounting mistakes. Then I noticed a pattern. Small amounts siphoned off from hundreds of accounts, adding up to millions over the years. In the internal server, password-protected folders held revealing documents, transfers to Cayman accounts, altered contracts. One particularly interesting folder labeled Carter Trust contained records of systematic misappropriation from one family account. $3.2 million over 5 years. I copied everything meticulously. Every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature. Richard wasn't just dishonest with the clients. He was stealing from his own family. Jennifer Carter, his widowed sister-in-law, had trusted him with her children's financial future after her husband, his brother, passed away. Trust betrayed in the worst possible way. Brian Wilson answered my call on the second ring. We were college buddies back when he inherited his father's venture capital firm. Amanda Collins? It's been so long. What brings you here? We met at the Four Seasons. Brian ordered a scotch while I explained the situation. I need a strategic partner, not just a shoulder to cry on, I concluded, sliding a folder with my findings across the table. He studied the documents in silence for about 20 minutes. Robert always said the best acquisitions start with someone who really sees the hidden value in a company. Brian smiled, mentioning his dad. Maxwell Financial is worth a lot more clean than dirty. I can rebuild it from scratch. I have the relationships, the experience, and the vision. And I've got the capital and the legal framework to make it happen quietly. Brian extended his hand. Partners. Our handshake sealed more than just a deal. It kicked off a transformation. Wilson Capital's legal team combed through every inch of the evidence I'd gathered. 4 lawyers and 2 forensic accountants worked day and night for 2 weeks. The fraud is more extensive than we thought, explained Sophia, the head of the legal team. He siphoned funds from at least 86 different clients. The investigation revealed a clear pattern. Richard targeted vulnerable victims, seniors, widows, people with little financial know-how. Jennifer Carter was just the tip of the iceberg. With this evidence, we have 2 options, Brian said during our strategic meeting. We can either report him directly to the authorities or use it as leverage to take over the company. The second option lets us fix the damage without destroying what's left of its value. We chose the tougher road, the one that would recover the victim's money and save the jobs of innocent employees. Kevin, my former assistant at Maxwell, quit a day after I was fired. I can't work for someone who treats people like that, he explained when we met at a cafe away from the financial district. Kevin became our eyes and ears, providing crucial internal info as we finalized our strategy. Richard's getting nervous, Kevin reported during one of our secret meetings. He's liquidating personal investments and moving money offshore. The biggest surprise came when Olivia Sutton, the new Richard favorite, approached me discreetly. I need to tell you something important, she said, nervously glancing over her shoulder. I'm not who Richard thinks I am. Olivia revealed she was Richard's niece, Jennifer Carter's daughter, using her mother's maiden name. She had infiltrated the company to gather evidence against the uncle who had robbed her family's inheritance. He didn't even recognize me. It's been years since he saw his own family, she explained, handing me a flash drive. Everything I've collected over the past few months is right here. Use it as you see fit. With these internal allies, we were ready for the next step. The offer arrived at Richard's office on an ordinary Thursday, a discreet envelope delivered by an anonymous messenger. No logo, no return address, just a cold, calculated purchase proposal. Brian and I watched from afar, working out of a temporary office 3 blocks from Maxwell Financial. Olivia was our eyes that crucial day. He opened the envelope and went pale, she reported over the phone. I've never seen Richard lose his composure like that. The offer was deliberately low, 60% of the company's estimated market value, the kind of bid a confident CEO would immediately reject. But Richard wasn't in any position to negotiate, not with his world crumbling around him. He tried to counter-offer, of course. His corporate lawyer, a guy named Daniels, whom I'd always suspected was in on the irregularities, requested a meeting with the mysterious buyer's representatives. We can reach a mutually beneficial deal, Daniels insisted over the phone with the Wilson Capital attorney. Mr. Maxwell built this company from scratch. He deserves a dignified exit. Dignity. As if Richard had ever shown any dignity by swindling his clients and family, or as if he had offered me any dignity after 6 years of loyal service. The negotiation lasted just 3 days, a surprisingly short time for an acquisition of this scale. Richard accepted our second offer, still 50% below market value. His rush to close the deal only confirmed our suspicions. He knew he was trapped. He's shredding documents, Kevin reported, staying in touch with his old colleagues. He spent the whole night at the office with an industrial shredder. It didn't matter. We had copies of everything. The sale contract included strategically crafted clauses, a transition period of only 3 days, absolute confidentiality about the buyer's identity until the official announcement, and a non-compete clause that kept Richard out of the financial sector for 5 years. He signed without question, another clear sign of his desperation. The bank transfer was completed on a Monday. At 9:15 a.m., Maxwell Financial Advisors officially changed hands. Richard thought he was getting away with millions before his fraud came to light. He had no idea that the real reckoning was just beginning. Maxwell Financial's main office had always intimidated its visitors. High ceilings, expensive abstract art on the walls, a panoramic view of Manhattan. The place exuded power and privilege, just as Richard had planned. I sat in his old chair, Italian leather, ergonomically perfect, and spun around to take in the city through the window. 6 years ago, I'd walked into that very building as an ambitious new grad. Now I was back as the owner. The intercom rang at exactly 10 a.m. Jessica, the receptionist who'd always been kind to me, announced, "Mr. Maxwell is here for the meeting scheduled with the new owner." "Send him in," I replied, barely able to hide a smile. Richard entered as confident as ever. Immaculate suit, perfectly aligned tie, that air of superiority that intimidated subordinates and impressed clients. It took him a few seconds to notice me in the chair that had been exclusively his for so long. "Amanda, what are you doing here? Where's the representative from Horizon Investments?" I slowly turned the chair to face him fully. "I'm Horizon Investments, Richard. Or at least I'm your main shareholder and CEO." The shock on his face was worth every cent invested, every hour of meticulous planning. "Is this some kind of joke? You don't have the resources for an acquisition of this magnitude. I've got excellent partners, people who see value where others only see limits." I handed him a navy blue folder with the Wilson Capital logo discreetly printed on it. "Brian Wilson sends his regards. He was particularly interested in your creative accounting methods." Richard visibly paled as he opened the folder. There, in chronological order, were the pieces of evidence for every fraud, every misappropriation, every lie he'd pulled over the years. This means nothing. I can explain every single one of these transactions. To the board, to the clients, to the authorities, to to your sister-in-law Jennifer." He slammed the folder shut abruptly, trying to regain some composure. "What do you want, Amanda?" "Money. A position in the company. I might be generous if we act like reasonable adults. I want exactly what I already have. Your old company, now scrubbed clean of your frauds. Your old chair, which is surprisingly comfortable. And the opportunity to fix the damage you caused." As I spoke, the door opened again. Olivia walked in, followed by Jennifer Carter and 2 federal agents. "Richard, long time, no see," Jennifer said coolly. The recognition in his eyes was instant and devastating. First when he realized who Olivia really was, then when he fully grasped the full extent of his downfall. "You planned this from the start," he muttered, looking at Olivia. "No," she replied. "I only planned on exposing your fraud." Amanda offered something much better: true justice. The federal agents moved in, one of them pulling an official document from his inside pocket. "Richard Maxwell, we have a warrant to seize all your electronic devices and personal financial documents." It wasn't an arrest yet, but it was the formal beginning of an investigation that would eventually destroy him completely. As the agents escorted him out, I stopped Richard with one final question. "Do you remember what you told me at the restaurant? That I was not capable of going any further?" He didn't answer, but his look said it all. I guess we found out who really hit their limits. The meeting with the entire former Maxwell financial team was tense and eye-opening. 42 employees crowded into the main conference room, their faces a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Many were still processing the sight of Richard being led out by federal agents hours earlier. "I'm not going to sugarcoat things," I began, looking each person in the eye. "The company you knew was built on systematic fraud perpetrated by Richard Maxwell. The good news is that we have the chance to build something better." Questions came pouring in. Some initially defended Richard, accusing me of pulling off a hostile takeover fueled by revenge. Others seemed relieved, as if they'd long suspected something was amiss. Olivia stood up beside me. "There's something you need to know about me," she announced. "My real name is Olivia Carter Maxwell." A murmur ran through the room as she continued. "Richard is my uncle. My father was James Maxwell, who passed away 5 years ago, leaving a fund for my mother, Jennifer, and my 2 younger brothers. Richard was the trustee. He stole $3, $2 million from our family while telling us the investments were underperforming." The silence in the room was absolute now. "I joined this company using my mother's maiden name to uncover the truth. I never meant to harm any of you. I just wanted justice for my family." Kevin then revealed his part in the investigation. 2 senior account managers, Patricia and Diana, admitted they'd noticed irregularities, but were afraid of losing their jobs if they questioned Richard. The most shocking revelation came from Daniels, the corporate lawyer, who asked to speak privately with me after the meeting. "I didn't know the fraud went so deep," he confessed, visibly shaken. "Richard manipulated me into structuring transactions that, on their own, seemed just aggressive, but now I see they formed a criminal pattern." Daniels handed me a folder containing documents that even our investigation hadn't uncovered. Properties in third-party names, additional offshore accounts, and surprisingly, a detailed plan to secretly sell the company to an international conglomerate, leaving employees and clients high and dry. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked. "I spent 20 years building a career on what I believed was ingenious integrity. I'm not going to be complicit in blatant fraud." That afternoon of revelations completely redefined our understanding of the company we'd acquired. The damage was deeper, the lies more extensive, but we also found unexpected allies among those who, like me, had been deceived by Richard Maxwell. The next 6 months were the most intense of my professional life. Transforming a company built on fraud into a respectable financial institution required more than just changing the name on the front. We started with the basics, a complete audit of every account, with transparent reports sent to all clients. Some were horrified and pulled their investments immediately. Others appreciated our honesty and chose to stick around. "We're building something different here," I explained during our first meeting with the now smaller staff. 36 people decided to stay. 6 opted to leave. Integrity Wealth Partners won't just be a name, it's going to be our core philosophy. We developed new compliance protocols, that far exceeded regulatory requirements. We implemented a triple-check system for all transactions over a certain amount. We created an ethics committee with rotating members every quarter. Kevin, promoted to Director of Investments, developed models that prioritize transparency and sustainable growth over quick gains. Our clients need to know exactly where their money is and why, he insisted during our strategic meetings. No black boxes or overly complicated schemes that are hard to explain in simple terms. The rebranding was comprehensive. We ditched the intimidating aesthetic that Richard so loved, the dark tones, the cold minimalism, the calculative abstract art meant to confuse. Our new visual identity embraced warmer colors, open spaces, and a design philosophy that invited collaboration instead of imposing authority. The toughest challenge was recovering the funds that Richard had embezzled. Most of it had already been spent on his extravagant lifestyle, but the federal investigation uncovered about $1.8 million in offshore accounts. We worked relentlessly with the authorities to ensure that money was returned to the victims. The Carter family was our top priority. Jennifer Olivia and her brothers recovered 70% of their funds in the first quarter after the acquisition. We committed to recouping the rest with the profits from the new company over the coming years. Brian Wilson remained a quiet partner, providing strategic guidance without interfering in day-to-day operations. "You understand this company and this market better than I do," he acknowledged during one of our strategy dinners. "My role is to provide the resources and remove obstacles. The rest is up to you." 3 months after the restructuring, we began attracting new clients, many of them referred by those who appreciated our ethical approach. 6 months later, our assets under management had recovered 92% of their pre-acquisition value, with a more diverse and loyal client base. But the true success wasn't in the numbers. It was in the culture we developed. Employees who had once operated under constant fear now flourished in an environment that valued initiative and integrity. Clients who were once seen as mere assets became genuine partners in their financial journeys. The most significant transformation was perhaps the least visible but equally profound. We proved that a financial firm could thrive by being completely transparent and ethical. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get more stories like this. The autumn weather was painting Manhattan in golden hues when I received the official notification. The federal case against Richard Maxwell had been settled with a plea deal. He cooperated fully with the authorities, giving up information about other fraudulent schemes in the sector in exchange for avoiding jail time. The civil penalties, however, were devastating. All his assets were liquidated to make victims whole. His license to operate in the financial market was permanently revoked. His reputation utterly destroyed. Jennifer called me that very afternoon. "I saw Richard today," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "He's working at a men's clothing store downtown, selling suits similar to the ones he used to wear." I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected. Instead, there was a strange peace, not for his suffering, but for the closure of a cycle. "How did that make you feel?" I asked. I thought I'd feel anger or maybe joy at his downfall, but I only felt pity. He lost everything that really matters long before he lost the money. That conversation crystallized something I'd been gradually understanding over the past few months. My initial motivation, a combination of revenge and a desire to prove my worth, had evolved into something bigger. The following week, I announced a new initiative at Integrity, a financial education program for communities traditionally excluded from the financial system. We dedicated 5% of our profits to finance scholarships for low-income students. We set up free workshops on basic investments and financial planning. At first, Kevin questioned the decision. "We're basically training our future competition," he argued. "We're raising the bar for the entire industry," I replied, "and creating a legacy bigger than ourselves." Now my desk proudly displayed a small glass plaque with a phrase that had become my personal mantra. "True success isn't about outdoing others, it's about lifting everyone up." Brian Wilson visited our office a year after the acquisition. We walked together through the open space, watching the team engaged and energized. "Impressive what you've built here," he commented. "My dad would have loved to see this. Do you think he'd approve of our results?" We're growing steadily but not explosively like some other firms in the sector. Brian smiled. Robert always said that any idiot can make a quick buck once. The real challenge is building something that delivers consistent value for decades. You're on the right path. That night, I stopped by the same men's clothing store Jennifer had mentioned. I watched Richard for a few minutes as he helped a customer pick out a tie. He looked smaller somehow, not just stripped of power, but fundamentally diminished. Our eyes met briefly. There was no dramatic confrontation, no exchange of words, just a silent acknowledgement of how differently our lives had turned out. I left without being noticed, walking the busy New York streets. The Empire State Building shone against the night sky, reminding me that this city has always been about ambition and reinvention. Before, I measured success by external recognition, promotions, bonuses, approval from authority figures like Richard. Now I understood that true success came from something deeper, the positive impact we create, the people we lift up, and the integrity with which we live our lives. It was no longer about proving that Richard was wrong about my limits. It was about completely redefining what it meant to have no limits, not in terms of personal power or wealth, but in the capacity for positive change. The Amanda Collins, who entered Maxwell Financial 6 years ago, really was not capable of going further, simply because she was working within a fundamentally flawed system. The Amanda emerging now had not only overcome that system, but created an entirely new paradigm of her own. And in that, I finally found my true potential, not in winning a crooked game, but in changing the rules so that they're fair for everyone. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get more stories like this.